Hey everybody, it's Greg and it's another edition of Unbreakable the podcast. It is Wednesday of the February 20th. And today is our classic TV night. Every Wednesday we do a classic TV show. We've done the Brady Bunch, we've done all the film, we've done the Beverly Hillbillies, we've done the Addams Family. A lot of fun. Today we're doing a classic TV show. I'm going to break this one up into two parts. Part one, part two will come up right after your show. That way it's you can watch these parts whenever you want to, mix and match. All right, without further ado, you're going to know the show. I'm going to sing the theme song. I'm going to try to sing the theme song. Actually, this song, as far as I know, doesn't have any words. No lyrics. I'm just going to do the instrumental part. You ready? Here we go. Da 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 da. Do you know what it is? Da 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 da. Yes, it is the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. That's right. The Tonight Show. Now, we're not going to do the Tonight Show before Johnny with, Jack Barr and Steve Allen. And we're not going to do the Tonight Show after Johnny, Jay Leno and Jimmy Fallon. We're just going to concentrate on the 30 years that Johnny Carson, the best there ever was the host of the Tonight Show. Let's talk about some things about the Tonight Show. Huh? You know what? I miss the Tonight Show. Yeah, the Tonight Show's still there. It's not the same without Carson. He was the best that ever did it. And he is the best that there's been and there ever has been. I mean, no one can compare. So let's talk about it. Johnny Carson started on the Tonight Show on October 1st, 1962. And his last show was May 22nd, 1992. I bet you a lot of people remember that show. I do. We're going to talk about that. The theme of the show was written by Paul Anka. Paul Anka, and as far as I know, there aren't any lyrics to that. I haven't even fun. 30 seasons, 30 years. Carson was on a total of 4,531 episodes. Wow. His producer for most of those years was Freddie DeCordova, and Don Rickles would come on, and then Freddie DeCordova, the Pity of Vocabulary. Rickles was remember all the guests on the frequent guests? Rickles was on the Rodney Dangerfield was one of my favorites on there. So many great comedians, musicians, actors would show up every so not only to hawk their new movie or their new album, or but just to hang out with Johnny. I remember one time Burt Reynolds was on. He was on a lot, especially in the 70s. And Burt Reynolds said, I don't have a movie out right now. I just come and hang with Johnny, and just want to hang with him. So, first 10 years of the show, 62 to 72, the show was located in New York. And then they moved out to Burbank, California from 72 to 92. And the reason why Carson made that decision was because he would get more guests out in Hollywood than he would in New York. Doc Severinsen, as a longtime band leader of the NBC Orchestra. And he's the only one, Doc, who's still alive. He is 96 years old. God bless Doc Severinsen. And up until not too long ago, recently, he was actually touring the country over there. Still playing his trumpet. And he has since well-deserved retired. Doc. Now, the monologue. The show was split up into different segments. You had the monologue of the night, Johnny started that, the monologue, and then you'd have a comedy bit, then you'd have the guests coming on. Well, the monologue was usually between 16 and 22 jokes. And they had a writer who just wrote the monologue. That was his job. That was it. Carson had other head writers on the show, but they did the bits and they did other things. But normally there was only one or two people who worked on the monologue every day. And Carson had a rule: no politics. It resisted. I mean, they talked about politics during the monologue. Don't get me wrong, and especially in the 70s and 80s, Reagan, a lot of the jokes were directed at Reagan's age. Does that sound familiar? And Jimmy Carter, the Peanut, the family, brother Billy, the bearded Leah. But generally, Carson tried to stay in politics. Now, he did have a rule for the monologue: not more than 3 jokes per subject. So let's say he had a joke about Reagan, right? Or a topic about Reagan. 3 jokes, and that was it. Because Carson felt anything over the 3 jokes was an overkill. Other than the celebrities, and we're going to talk about that, who appeared on the show most of all, Carson had his animal acts on there. Do you remember Jim Fowler from Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom? He would come on with animals. Joan Embry, San Diego Zoo, would come on a lot. And she would bring animals, and Carson would interact with them, and show the cheetah there snapping at Carson, or Carson holding the little squirrel monkey who's playing with Carson's hair. That kind of cute stuff. Carson also had a group that he called the Intimates, that he would like on the show every so often, such as Dr. Joyce Brothers. Remember Dr. Joyce Brothers, the psychologist? And his favorite was Carl Sagan, the astronomer. Billions and billions of stars. In fact, Carson got to be friends with Sagan. Carson did not have many friends. Carson was sort of an introvert, a really shy guy, off camera. And he didn't really fraternize. He didn't really mingle with a lot of his guests. But he did become friends with Carl Sagan. Why? Because Carson was an amateur astronomist. He had, in fact, in his beautiful home, I don't know if you ever saw Johnny Carson's home, beautiful place out in Malibu, California, right on the beach, overlooking the ocean. Beautiful, beautiful house. Carson had a really high-functioning telescope set there. Can you imagine that, looking out over the stars, at the stars over the ocean? So Carson loved things like astronomy. So we got to be close friends with Carson. But Carson did not like comedians with problems like Gallagher. Do you remember Gallagher used to smash the watermelons and used to drop them? That became a thing with David Letterman. But Carson didn't like that. He liked guys who came out and told jokes in a routine, not the prop guys. He was a tough interview. In fact, Robert Blake, who was a frequent guest of Carson's, described sitting down to be interviewed by Carson as being put in front of a death squad for a Broadway opening night. That's what kind of nerves you had when you were with Johnny Carson's show. Because think of it this way: you're on with millions and billions of people, even though the show was taped, it was still live, the tape. And who knows what you're going to say, right? But this was the big time. This was the shot that showed that everybody wanted to be one, whether you were a rock band or a comedian or an actor. You wanted to be on the Johnny Carson show. Carson was very good at interviewing. I'd say, some of the leading interview, Larry King, right, was a great interview. But Carson was he was a great listener. And any great interviewer will tell you, it's more than just asking questions, it's listening, picking up the cues. That's what Dick Cavett did so well for so many years. Uh, so yeah, as we said, you see the beginning of, usually before the show starts, a host may go to what they call the green room and say hello to the guest or anything. Carson never did that. Only once in a great while when you knock on a dressing room door. He did it with Orson Welles, the first time Welles was on the show. He did it with Gleason when Jackie Gleason was on the show. But generally, Johnny Carson did not mingle with the guests. And even after, if you see after the Carson show, where everybody stands up at the end and they go out in front of the desk and it looks like they're talking and stuff, and, that's all, and window dressing. So they're just talking to get off the Johnny Carson just wasn't one to fraternize with very many people. The big thing about the Johnny Carson show, they get this, was the guests didn't get paid that much to be on the show. They had like a couple $100. But the big thing was the publicity. You could not get better publicity. If you were on the Carson show, that was worth its weight in gold. I mean, and especially if Carson liked your act or your music or your comedy, if he hauled you over to the couch like this, that was the sign that you made it. You had made it, you liked your act, come on over to the couch and get more time with listening and get this talking to me. That's what every person in the show they stripped and wanted that to get to the couch. In fact, they said that there was two like listeners said, two things you wanted when you appeared in the television. One was that fall into the couch. Nothing to be what's in the first. Two was make Johnny. If you could make Johnny, you have a life that which your lives. So, what is things that just go up? How much and serve and see you? That's what he paid on to. So, he said something made Johnny something. He would stuck with it all his life. What it was all time achievements. Of course, we know Ed McBeal was his rock, his sidekick, his second band of all those years. And the catchphrase, "Here's Johnny," was TV Land voted it the #1 catchphrase in all of television history. Here's Johnny. And of course, here's Johnny in movies like The Shining. Remember with Jack Nicholson? Here's Johnny. So, Carson and McBeal met each other. They did a game show together in the late 50s, early 60s called Who Do You Trust? They did it for 5 years. So when Carson got the Tonight Show gig, he brought Ed McBeal with him. And Ed McBeal was the second banana. When McBeal wrote his autobiography back in the 90s, McBeal knew what his job was. In fact, he said, "I knew what my meat and potatoes were." He was there to laugh at Carson's jokes, to support anything that Carson said. In fact, he learned his lesson in 1965. Carson did a joke, and McBeal ruined it. Well, he got a bigger laugh and he said something that got a bigger mouth than Johnny's joke. Well, that was that lesson because Johnny lit into Ed after the show and said, never, ever, ever step on one. Never. Since then, Ed McMahon never got, he made sure he did not get the big left. He set everything up for John. Ed was the straight man. He said everything. Once in a while, Ed would get a left, but he knew his place. He knew if he was getting his money was being Johnny Carson straight man. And Ed McMahon did a lot of work on it. He did his part of sketches. He did TV commercial. Remember Alpo? We did a commercial. He warmed up the audience, things we didn't even see on TV. I think that was a good part of the show. He didn't mind playing what he called the second fiddle. That was his role, was his job. We knew that we talked about Doc 7. When Doc wasn't there, Doc was on vacation. Tommy Newsom, who was in the band as well, played the clarinet. Tommy Newsom would take over the band. And Tommy Newsom played this not too bright, little guy. Tommy Newsom joined the orchestra in 1967. We talked about Freddie DeCorvino, actually was producer of the Tonight Show from the very start, but became executive producer in 1984. And would you know, believe it or not, one of Johnny Carson, not a famous people who wrote for Carson. In fact, one of his very first head writers who did the monologues, the jokes, was Dick Cavett. And Dick Cavett moved on, as we know, and eventually got his own talk show. There were quite a few characters Carson had during his reign on the Tonight Show. Remember Karnak the Magnificent? Karnak was this clairvoyant, mystical guy with the big hat on there. Psychic, he was a psychic. And he would put an envelope up to his head, and he would determine the answer in the envelope without opening it. For instance, one of his jokes was he would just debate. And McMahon, the routine was he would repeat whatever Carson said. Debate. Carson would rip open the envelope, blow inside of it, and said, what do you use to catch the fish? Debate. Another one was Ben Gay. And then McMahon would say, Ben Gay. Rip it open. Why did Mrs. Franklin have any kids? Dinner. And this one, it was Ed McMahon's favorite. He wrote about this in his autobiography. This was his favorite joke of all the years of Carmen and then listen. Sis Bob. The little bit. Describe the sound made when the sheep explodes. Sis Bob. So crazy stuff, right? What fun. Some of the other characters that Carson did over the years. Floyd R. Turner was this dim-witted yokel who would go on the local TV station and do an editorial rebuttal thing, and he would talk about all kinds of crazy stuff. Art Fern, the Tea Time movie guy, would go on and introduce the movie and try to sell things in between doing the commercials. And the matinee lady, they would have a matinee lady there with Art Fern. There were several matinee ladies over the years. Some are really famous, like Lee Merriweather was a matinee lady. Julia Prowse, the dancer, was a matinee lady. But probably the most famous, in fact, she was the matinee lady for 10 years on the Carson Show. was Carol Wade. Beautiful, beautiful blonde, Carol Wade. And Art Fern would say, come down to the showroom, and he would show him that. And he would say, take the fork in the road, and there would actually be a fork on the map, Go to the Schlossen cutoff, you could cut off from Schlossen. And it was just stupid stuff, but funny stuff. Aunt Blabby, where Carson would dress up as this old woman, sort of like it was sort of a ripoff of Jonathan Winters. I don't know if you remember Jonathan Winters, who dressed up like an old woman. And Carson also had this character called El Bondo, who was this mind reader. And he also did a really good impression, too, of Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan. And some of his early bits that kind of lasted throughout the show, the 30 years, stumped the band, as where he would go out into the audience and he would ask one of the audience members if they had a song that the band never heard of, try to stump them, and the audience member would give a title to a song, and Doc and the audience in the band would try to play it. And chances are they never heard the song, And people with prizes and stuff. It was sort of a fun thing. And then Carson had what he called the Mighty Carson Art Players, where they would act out different plays and scenarios. And most of the time it would end up with people getting hit with cream pies. And it's sort of like a soupy sales thing. Carson in his bits stole a little bit of everything from different people. That's how it was, And when we talk about Carson in the programming, it was on NBC. It was always pre-taped. And the show originally ran from 11:30 until 1. And during its heated, the Tonight Show was the most profitable show on NBC, even more profitable than anything invented. That's how popular and that's how powerful a Tonight Show is. It would bring in a revenue of $50 to $60 million. And when we're talking about the 60s and 70s, that was a lot more money than that. So Carson, here's the thing. Carson lost so much power on NBC because he knew that without the Tonight Show, NBC would be losing a lot of its revenue. So he started to dictate. He started the rules. He had, say, in the Lending Show, it went from, in 1980, it went from a 90-minute show down to a 1-hour show. And that was Carson. That was Carson's request. And if you remember, up until 1974, Carson, 90-minute show every weekday. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, the Tonight Show was so popular, they would show reruns of the Tonight Show, Saturday night and even Sunday reruns. Well, then in 74, now Carson started to say, they actually started showing reruns instead of guest hosting. What did the guest host? And they would show reruns during the week of Carson's TV show. Now, here's the interesting thing. Carson had a lot of power over the broadcasters. And so he decided, overexposure. I don't want to show Tonight Show reruns on the weekends anymore. I feel like the show's been overexposed, So we got to think of something else. Got to think of something else to do with the weekends. So NBC said, what are we going to do? We can't show the Tonight Show anymore. Johnny doesn't want it. They were going to put on in October 1975. Johnny Carson and his son. Saturday Night. Okay. Lauren Michaels was the producer, but he still produces it. Think about that. If it wasn't for Carson, if it wasn't for the fact that Carson did not want the Tonight Show to be overexposed as much as it was 7 nights a week, we may never have had Saturday Night Live or discovered a great talent on Saturday Night Live, Belushi, Ackland, Bill Murray, Killer Run. So in 1980, the show went to 1 and 4. September the 12th, 1980 was the last 90-minute show ever of the Tonight Show. Now, what happened was the network needed to fill that time. You just couldn't say, all right, we're going to chop off the last half hour, because Carson didn't want to do 90 minutes anymore. He only wanted to do an hour. He was getting really, really certain about about the show. So they said, all right, so what can we do to fill in that half an hour? At first, they devised a show called The Tomorrow Show. Do you remember The Tomorrow Show? Tom Snyder. Tom Snyder was actually a Philadelphia news guy, and then at KYW at the time. The Tomorrow Show. On The Tomorrow Show was another talk show without an audience. Tom Snyder, 1-to-1 with a guest or two for an hour. That didn't last very long. So what did they do? Again, Carson came up with the idea of having another show after his with an audience, and that's how the David Letterman show originated. Because Johnny Carson loved David Letterman. In fact, even after Carson retired, he had a big say as to who was going to take over for him, but so did NBC. And, Carson was coming to the end of his reign of power, so he didn't have as much clout as he did, let's say, back in the 70s and 80s when he was in his heyday. Carson always said, after he retired, David Letterman should have been that kid. In fact, if you remember, Letterman really wanted that kid. And there was reports that Letterman and Carson were getting long, blah. Maybe for a short time. Actually, Letterman wanted the gig, Carson wanted Letterman to have the gig, and they were friends, and they were remained friends up until Carson died. Well, as we know, the job eventually went to Jimmy Lennon. That wasn't Carson's first choice. And final thing we're going to talk about before we go to part 2. 1979, 1980. Johnny Carson had a big dispute with the network. Wanted his contract. He wanted to do it over again. What happened? Big thing, made the papers. I remember this. But you got to remember, back in those days, no internet. So you actually had to go to a newspaper, believe it or not, to get most of your news. No cable. Cable was just in its infancy. So Carson was on the verge of walking away from NBC. The contract negotiations were not going well, to say the least. ABC swooped in and almost got Carson. In fact, they offered this. This is what they had on the table. They were going to double Johnny Carson's salary, double it. They were going to give him a lighter work schedule. Carson was going to own part of the show. That was really, really good. And it was very surprising why Carson didn't take that deal. I guess loyalty. Carson had been with NBC for so long, but there were, NBC was trying to cover the raps too, because they were grooming Richard Dawson, people. Remember Richard Dawson on Family Feud? The guy who used to kiss everybody. They were grooming Richard Dawson to take over as host, permanent host of the Tonight Show, just in case Johnny Carson decided to walk away. Richard Dawson had done quite a few appearances on the Tonight Show, and they thought he would be the next host. Well, as it turned out, Carson went back to NBC. They hammered out a new contract. Carson was making $25 million a year, and again, that may not seem like much. That's a lot, even to me. Come on, but back in 1980, we're talking 44 years ago. That was big money. $25 million a year. Carson had 15 weeks of vacation every year. And if you remember, Carson was a big tennis fan. Usually around July 4th, Carson would not be in the States. He would be over in England. He attended Wimbledon every single year. They would show the Wimbledon final. Wimbledon, Carson and his whoever his wife was at the time would be in the crib. 15 weeks a year. And here's the breakdown. Monday would be a guest host. And as we're going to talk about in part 2, a lot of that times that was Jay Leno, that was Joe Rivers, right? Tuesdays was the rerun day. They called it the Best of Carson rerun. And so basically, after 1980, Johnny Carson only worked Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays every week. Made $25 million a week a year, and he worked an hour a day. It's great if you could get it right. Great. So that brings us up to 1980 and beyond. We're going to talk about Carson, how the show ended, the final show, and some more backstage stuff about the Tonight Show and the great Johnny Carson. So stay tuned for part 2. I'm going to take that right now and look for part 1. It's going to be a link on my Twitter site, Eddie Bilson. Thanks for watching part 1, our weekly TV classic, The Tonight Show, with Johnny. Stay tuned for part 2. See you soon.